Hi, my name is Thomas Cook from RE/MAX Hallmark, and welcome to today's Real Estate Minute. Our special guest today is George Christopoulos from the Mortgage Center, and our topic today is going to be home buyer basics. How do you actually get started? So there's really three variables that impact on the real estate that you buy. There's price, and there's location, and there's condition. So let's talk about price and affordability and so on. So how do you work out how much you can afford for a shelter?
Well, the basic calculations that we use and the bank calculations are 32% of your gross income for the property itself. And that would include principal, interest, tax, and a component for heat. And if you have a condo, a portion of the maintenance fees in our calculations. And then the other factor that we use is 42% of your total income that encompasses everything I just mentioned, plus any additional debt that you may have, maybe a student loan or a car lease, for example.
Okay, so just in general terms, how would you calculate? You'd use all these numbers to calculate how much a larger mortgage they'd qualify for, and then what would you give them in writing to guarantee that they would have that mortgage available to them?
Well, we would do an interview with the client, and as I like to call it, a financial tune-up, review everything associated with their living expenses on a month-to-month basis, and then we would start by doing what we call a full pre-approval.
Okay, so you would provide, or you would ask the buyer to provide proof of income, proof of down payment, and you'd ask them to give you the authorization to do a credit bureau for them, right?
Correct. We take all that information and then provide them with a budget. And that budget would be based on their personal goals on a monthly basis, and then we'd expand on it a little bit and see what else they could afford, maybe based on the longer amortization, and give them as much information as we can to help them in their home buying process.
Okay, so some people think that you need a lot of money as a down payment to get started, and some people think you can get away with zero. So where does the reality lie there?
Reality is that there still are two zero down payment programs available. One is what we call a free down payment, where we have a bank give you the 5% down payment, and that's incorporated into your interest rate. And then the other one is where you can borrow the down payment from a line of credit, for example. But typically, most Canadians, 5% down payment. We're conservative in Canada, and that's a good thing. So the larger down payment you have, the more financially you will be secure going forward.
So let's say you have less than 20% down. Because if you have 20% or more, that's called a conventional mortgage that you would get. If you have 20% or less than 20%, that's called a high ratio mortgage. So how does that impact the buyer if they're having a high ratio mortgage?
Well, if you have a high ratio mortgage, and you know, for the record, this is how most first-time buyers in Canada purchase their homes. You are obligated under banking regulations to have what we call mortgage insurance. And this is a one-time fee that is added to your mortgage. The two large companies you would have heard of are CMHC and Genworth Financial, and they provide the coverage here. The amount that you pay on this premium is determined by the size of your down payment and the length of your amortization. But as I said, it's a one-time fee. It becomes part of your monthly payment, and it gets you into your home quicker because it's very hard to save a down payment sometimes.
Okay, so the other two sort of pillars are the location and condition. So first step always is to find out how much you can afford to pay. Right? So now you know an exact budget amount of the maximum that you could purchase your home for. Then you're going to pick some neighborhoods that you would like to live in. Now, if you want to live in Rosedale and your purchase price maximum is $400,000, you may not make it, right? But typically that you're going to take that into consideration. And let's say you wanted to live in a particular neighborhood, but you are at the lower end of the price range for that neighborhood, so typically then the variable would be condition of the home, right? So you would say, well, you know, I would rather live on a busy street and be in that neighborhood, or I would rather buy an estate sale home that needs some fix-up, or perhaps start off with a condo in that neighborhood, might be a lower price range to get yourself started and so on. So there's many options available for the buyer, and that's why you really need to have a strong mortgage consultation up front, which takes how much time typically?
Oh, anywhere between a half hour to 45 minutes, or sometimes we can do it in as little as 5 or 10 minutes, just in a brief conversation over the phone. But that's just to get you started. A proper consultation should take half hour to about 45 minutes.
Okay. And very expensive, I'm sure?
Very expensive. It's actually free. There is no cost to do this. And one of the services that we do offer when we do our mortgage pre-approval for you is that we'll get you a interest rate guaranteed for 120 days with a major bank. No cost to do this, and we put the power into your hands so you make this home buying process smooth as possible.
Perfect. And the other options, besides getting that mortgage consultation, is having a consultation with your realtor. Now, depending on where you are in the process, whether you're a year away or 3 months away, will determine how in depth you want to go with that. Our first step is what we call let's meet for a coffee, where we would meet you at Starbucks or Timmy's, spend 20 minutes to a half an hour, just reviewing some of the background of the home buying process, talking about what your expectations are, and giving you sort of a plan to go ahead with the process. Another option is a buyer planning session. That's a little more in depth. We would have you fill in a couple of online forms that would give us a wish list and what we call an ultimate scenario. So then we can talk about what your specific concerns are around the home buying process. The buyer planning session takes about 30 minutes to maybe 45 maximum. And then finally, when the time is coming when you're actually ready to get started with your home buying purchase, we would have what we call our formal buyer consultation, which typically takes about an hour or so. And then at the end of that hour to an hour and 15 minutes, you'll go home with a very specific plan in mind of how the process is going to go forward and what all the steps are through the entire process. So think about where you are in the timeline for the home buyer. Always talk to a lender ahead of time, have that lender consultation, whether it's the initial over the phone one or depending on your timeline again in person. So thanks very much, George, for coming today. Thanks very much for all of you to turning into today's Real Estate Minute, and we'll see you again.